Hello everyone, this is Zevo and welcome to this AFK Journey video. So in today's AFK Journey video, we are going to talk about another ZBEST guide series, and that is ZBEST Endgame Arena tier list. So before I start talking about the tier list as well as tier ratings, just a few disclaimer. So number one, Arena tier list is always going to be subjective. Based on your experience, based on how many spenders, based on how creative your bracket is, as well as based on the units that your other players use against you, you will have a different opinion for different sets of units. So for today's video, I'll base it off my own as well as my experience from other players sharing their records as well as their strats with me, because there are certain units which I think they are quite slept upon even on Premium's website, and I can see them being amazing in certain situations. I can see them being really good under certain situations. So I'm going to talk about all that. Then secondly, right, the tier list will be based around units with at least, I'll say, their EX weapons, so Mythic Plus and above. Obviously, I think for Arena per se, in order to see the full power of the unit, you need the units at least at Supreme Plus with their EX weapon +5 or +10. That's the bare minimum, okay? So a lot of this discussion will be facilitated around this pointer, which is, I'll say, at least Supreme Plus with EX weapon, okay? Obviously, I'll also input some of the inputs for the Paragon side of things, because there are certain units which generally people just put them to Paragon because number one, they are very strong units, obviously, so people upgrade them to Paragon first, and number two, because they are units that are amazing in Arena. And for Paragon tier, you get rivalry stats which affects Arena, so with that power up, right, some of these units become uber powerful in the Paragon tier. They might not be the strongest before Paragon, but they can be the strongest after the Paragon, so I'll talk about that as well. And then lastly, right, or rather two more pointers. So number two, this tier list is pre-Song of Strife, so this is the second last point. Pre-Song of Strife, so this is before seasonal skill as well as Supreme Arena. So if you're watching this video from the future, right, and your bracket doesn't have the Song of Strife active yet, this tier list will be highly applicable to you. So when Song of Strife drop, right, with seasonal skill as well as Supreme Arena being a thing, I'll definitely craft up a whole new set of tier lists which will be released based on like the observations I get as well as how the meta changes, so you guys can stay tuned for that. So lastly, right, this tier list, before I start, I'll talk about the tier ratings. So the tier rating, number one, meta tier list. So meta rating, right? So these are units which are generally meta, both on the offense and defense. So these are top tier units for Arena, and you can build teams around them because they are very stable both offensively and defensively. Some of them are slightly above the rest compared to others, but there are other units which are also really good, and there are units which people build teams around. So these are the units at the highest tier, and obviously there will be some units that will be meta only in Paragon tier, or they are extremely meta in the Paragon tier. So I'll talk about all that. So those are the units that are in the meta tier. Then we have the offense meta. So these units, I'll say they are meta offensively, like they are good units you use to attack people because of their kit. Mostly they will be assassins or units that counter specific teams, and then these units are units which you can use offensively but not so good defensively. Like when you think of defense, you won't think of these units, but when you think of offense, these units are amazing because of their kit, based on what they want to do, as well as you know, based on the meta itself, right? So that's for the offense meta. Then we have the generally usable. So units in these tiers are units which are generally usable for Arena per se. They're obviously not the strongest units for Arena, but in certain situations where you can get them to work, they can be quite strong there as well. Like they are units which obviously is not like the best for Arena per se, but if let's say you don't have other better units and you have these units trained up, right, and you want to try to use them, you can definitely do it. Like they are not that bad, they are just not the best unit. Then we have niche units. So niche units are units which can definitely work in specific situations. These units are units which you use to counter people under specific situations, and they are niche units. So they are not units which people will generally train up, but if you're somebody who's an Arena fanatic and you kind of want to counter specific strategies, or you kind of want to build a team around specific strategies, then you can run this niche unit. So these are very less seen unit, but they do have some use in arena depending on the situation, depending on how you build your team. So that's for the niche tier. Then lastly, we have the walker tier. So for the walker tier, these are units which I generally don't recommend for anyone. Like, I don't see them a lot and I don't recommend people to use them, and I'll explain why. So they are usually the toilet bowl units, which I mentioned multiple times. So if you want to use them, sure, go ahead, but they're just not very good in the arena, at least based on my personal observations. Okay, so I'll start with the walker tier as usual. So Chirpy, Hemi, Faye, Walker, Valen. Okay, Chirpy, Hemi is basically because of you can't upgrade them, so there's no value in trying to use them in arena unless you're trying to do a meme team, or unless you're trying to do a content out of it. So generally don't use them. So Faye, Walker, Valen, Morel, Atalanta, Cassidy. A Light Bearer is actually pretty underpowered in arena in a sense, because you guys will realize a lot of the Graveborn units being very meta. I'm just gonna put some of the very meta Graveborn units on top so you guys can see it for yourself. So you guys can see, right, like there's a lot of really powerful Graveborn units out there, and these are units which you see running around almost everywhere, both on offense and defense. So Light Bearer as a whole, if they're not good enough, or they are too slow, or if they are too frail, then they will get gunned down by this Graveborn, right, nonetheless. So for Faye's case, you have better healers out there, so generally you don't see people using her. Might see some use in Supreme Arena, but I do think there's just way better healers out there compared to her, so she won't be the top priority that you want to invest in specifically for arena game mode. So Walker is a little bit of everything, right? CC, a little bit of damage, a little bit of sniping off, but I think his little bit is just, he's not even a jack of all trades. Like, he's just a unit that does so little for everything, and you just have better options out there that you would rather invest in other units rather than Walker, right? At least before seasonal skill. So Valen's case, I think I explained a few times. So Valen and Celezo, I'll say they face similar issues. I think both their kit does something. Celezo is more control centric, like he stuns, he sort of force enemies to not be able to do anything. And then for Valen's case, is a lot of damage, especially AoE damage. But these two units, they are warrior units that will run in front at the start of the battle no matter what. So they will charge in front and they get taunted, right? They are in melee range and they are very frail because they don't have any sort of defensive skills. So based on how the current meta is and based on how the arena is working, these units are just not really good because they'll get bursted even before they do anything, because they're running straight to the front, right? So they're not surviving without any sort of defensive skill. No lifesteal, no defense up, makes them like pretty much the first to die in most battle, right? So that's for these two units. Then we have Morel's case. So Morel is a case of her ultimate being really powerful but way too slow. Yeah, like if you can get her ultimate off, I do think that she might be usable. If there's some way to boost her ultimate usage, she might be usable, but at least where it is way too slow and you will just die before you even do anything. Same thing for Cassidy. I think Cassidy might see some use moving forward if there's more mage teams, but I mean, there's Iron already available in the pool, right? So I'm not gonna put Iron there. Like, you guys probably know the Iron Carolina stuff. So Iron does everything better with magical reduction in arena. So Cassidy is sort of like in a limbo where, okay, you have a really powerful skill, okay, you do make mage teams better, but there's another guy that's meta and way stronger up there. So like, yeah, I won't think of Cassidy when I think of arena. Like, this unit I'll say is more PvE centric anyway. So for Atalanta's case, very agile unit, but honestly speaking is very bad, right? Being very evasive, jumping around, you know, is not really that good in an auto setting in the first place. So sometimes she'll just jump to a death, sometimes depending on where she positions herself, the effectiveness of the skill is not maximized. So generally not a good arena unit. Like, I think her season skill is interesting and I might try to experiment with her if the season skill is really overpowered. I think the doppelganger skill, the shadow clone skill, if she's able to spawn a few copies of herself, that could be something that you might want to build around. But we shall see, But based on the current setting, based on pre-Song of Strife, not very good. Don't bother using her. So Lumon, okay, Lumon in arena, right? I can say that if you do decide to build Lumon up, this unit might be of some use in arena. In a sense, this unit is meant to be an arena centric character. He's meant to be a formation breaker. He's meant to just rush to the front line and then push your enemy running all around the place. That is if you do decide to invest in him. Like in general, I think Lumon's kit is just not very suitable for the different game modes in the game, and it's a really heavy investment to pour into this unit, which is not even that stable because his role as a tanker is not very stable because his kit is not the tankiest, right? And there are so many good tankers out there, and being a formation breaker who runs around also has a little bit of RNG. What if he sends the enemy back to your backline and then your backline just get wiped by the enemy that got pushed back by Lumon over here? So I think this unit, if he does get a powerful seasonal skill, might go up. But based on the current skill set, this unit is just not a unit that people invest in, number one. Number two, it's just a little bit too RNG based on what he wants to do. The formation breaking part is cool though, but it's just too random, at least for Lumon's case. Then for Kruger's case, Kruger is strictly a Dream Realm character. In Arena with Supreme Plus tier as well as the EX weapon, you might be able to use him in certain situations for Arena, but I don't think it's a unit that you run in Arena in the first place. Like I don't see a lot of people running, and like his kit is always meant to be a bossing kit to begin with. So I'm just gonna put him in Walker tier, at least for Arena side of things. Then we have our dear Khafra over here. So Khafra's case, very similar to Celezo as well as Valen in a sense. Like this unit's kit, right, does have a little bit of defensiveness built into him, but I think Khafra is a case of a little bit of Lumon and a little bit of Valen, as well as him not having a team. So why Lumon? Because Khafra is a unit that, like Lumon, where people don't usually recommend, so there will be very little people using him in the first place, building him up. So he won't be Supreme Plus for most people, right? People won't put their resources into his EX weapon to begin with. Then secondly, as a warrior unit, he will charge in front. So he does have some sort of heal, and he does have a specific niche, which is to chase after the healers, but I think there's just no team that fits him right now, and there's no strat that you kind of want to use his kit. So yeah, like being a unit that people don't invest in, being a unit that's super niche and it's not even that strong, is not a good thing, right? So that's why this unit is a Walker tier. Based on how his seasonal skill works out, I think he might see some use. So these are just my opinions for Khafra's case. Okay, so these are for the Walker tier. Next, let's talk about the niche units. So these units are units which generally they don't work, but there are specific strategies or specific conditions where you might see them working. So I'll start with the first unit, and that is Parisa. So for Parisa's case, right, Parisa is actually a really powerful damage dealer and buffer. You can use her together with Dornell to activate Dornell's kit, and this unit does have decent damage output, but her kit on her own is very slow. So in most cases, if you are using her, you're using her when you have a specific comp. For example, maybe Wilder's mage team, and you can stall long enough for her to do what she wants. She can definitely be used. So that is the niche situation. Like, I think you can definitely use Parisa, but Parisa is a unit where you need, I'll say, like a team idea, right? You need a specific comp, and you need additional damage, and you can fulfill the buying of time for her to do what she wants. So that's for Parisa's case. The other unit I'll say is niche is Smokey. Okay, Smokey is just an amazing unit all around, but this unit is just way weaker in Arena in a sense. There's a lot of control, there's a lot of taunts, there's a lot of freezes, there's a lot of stuns, there's a lot of immobility, so he gets disrupted really easily. So the case where his niche is if you can find a situation where you can use his skill without being interrupted, this unit is still going to be really powerful in Arena. But in most cases, you're going to get interrupted, right? Be it offensively or defensively, because number one, if you're facing against Iron team, this unit is basically useless, because at the start of the battle, you just get disabled, right? Then you have Arden who can disable, then you have Carolina who can disable, and you even have Confining Spell who can disable him. So he's definitely not usable in most cases, but in cases where you can get his skill off, where there's not a lot of control, you can definitely run Smokey. Okay, so that's for Smokey's case. Satrana as well. Satrana's kit is arena centric, and it's a very very niche kit where she actually can counter specific comms, which I'll talk about her in the future. But generally you don't use her, and generally people don't build her, and people who actually build her up are basically whales who are really into arena in the first place. So this unit is going to be super duper niche, at least based on the current outlook of the game. Next unit, which is really really niche. Okay, Hailwind as well as Corin, really really niche. Okay, so the reason why I put these units in the niche category rather than in the Walker tier is because these two units, they are the best Dreamwell units out there. So there will be situations where these units, because they are at a very high tier, and you need some sort of DPS as well as a warrior that can shield and do damage at the same time in your team, and you can fill them, because these units you will invest in them anyway. So if you need them, right, if you can use them, that's where you put them in, and that's why they are niche. So they are not usable most of the time. Like, they are not, obviously they're not good against the Graveborn side of things. They're also not the most meta units in arena per se, but they are going to have a lot of your investments inside them. They're going to hold a lot of your resources, so you can actually run them if you find a situation to use them. So these two units, they are in the niche category. Yeah, I think that's it for the niche side. Like, niche units are units which I think are units that you can definitely use if you have certain conditions. They are definitely not arena centric characters, or they're not the best arena characters, or they're not good arena characters, but they are units which, let's say, if you have certain conditions fulfilled, you can run them in your team both offensively and defensively. Okay, so that's for the niche unit. So I think that's that. Actually, I kind of want to put Rise here. Okay, no, Rise is probably generally usable. Okay, so next we gotta talk about generally usable units. I think this pool, right, is very very subjective, because based on how meta-ish your server is, right, some of these units just don't see use, because a lot of these units, they are countered by the meta units, or they just don't function really well against the meta unit. And the first one, right, that I always say is Sisia. So Sisia, I think if she's not facing against some of the most meta comms, or she's not facing against some of the more meta units or the more structured teams, she is generally really powerful. She used to be the meta queen, and she does have a few comms that will work for her in the past. So right now, I think those teams as well as those comms are still usable, right? But obviously not the strongest. So to some people, I think they will find their Sisia dominating the server because their server is weaker, they have lesser active players, they have less meta teams in the bracket. So this is gonna be one of the most subjective side of things. But if you're talking about a really meta bracket, Sisia has no space there, because the top units are gonna counter her really really hard. So generally you don't see like her a lot. Okay, next unit which is generally usable is Tamasia, Lucius. So these two light barrel tanks, right, I think they are both good for different things. So Tamasia is a very disruptive tank, and she does get CC immunity as well as some sort of debuff and a little bit of damage going for her in the arena side of things. In fact, Tamasia's kit is more meant for arena if you take a look at it carefully. But the reason why she's in a generally usable tier, obviously, number one, is because Graveborn is very dominant up there. So people are going to use Graveborn to attack you. People are going to use Graveborn for defensive purposes. So if you run a tank that's weak to one of the most used factions as well as one of the most powerful faction, then you're going to lose out a lot. So that's why you don't use Tamasia. Same thing for Lucius. Personally, this unit is generally good if you do get him to Supreme Plus with the EX weapon, but you just have number one, better choices, and number two, you have a lot of hurdle to overcome, especially with Graveborn being so powerful. So that's for these two light barrel tank. I think Rise is okay, generally okay AoE damage dealer. Like, I don't think he particularly excel at anything. Same thing for Antandra. So Antandra is there because for tank side usually is dominated by these two tanks in the first place, Granny and Torrent. So you're either invested in one one of them. Like if you are bad on your Torrent luck, you invest in Danny. If you are if you're super lucky and you get Torrent to Supreme Plus really quickly, you'll be running Torrent for your team, or you're investing in both if you are a spender, if you have the resources. So generally for Antendra's case, right, so Antendra is just a secondary tank, which I think if you have spare resources you want to put into, then you put into her. But she's not like a main tank material because she's used more as a secondary tank, and you have better tank options up there already. So that's why she's generally usable, not the best for arena. Okay, then we have Ryze. So generally usable AoE attacker. I think that's the best for Reese. Okay, by the way, this unit's name is Reese. So I always mispronounce, so people correct me. So Reese over here, just a very, I'll say like average unit. So good for damage, good for AoE, but doesn't particularly excel at anything. So that's why this unit is here. Laika. Laika has a team together with Dwonel. I think Laika generally has a team which people run with in Wilders as well. Maybe if you want to hyper accelerate your skills, if you want to have a little bit of initiative, you can definitely run Laika. But Laika is not going to be a unit you think of when you think about arena, because there's just so many better options out there. And I think Laika as a unit per se is a unit that doesn't have a team right now as well. Like maybe Dwonel's team. So that's the only exception I can think of. Like if you want to run a Dwonel hyper carry team, she is definitely a good unit there, right? But other than that, I don't know. I don't see a team where you will fit her in. So that's one of her issue. So her buffs looks good, her kit looks good, AoE damage with defense reduction, and I just don't know why like she doesn't see more use. And maybe because her kit is just way too niche. Yeah, she does have a shield breaker ability, so if your enemy is very shield heavy, she might be of some use there as well. So in general, I just say that Laika is like a decently good unit, but it's just, I don't know, like you don't think of her as a meta unit up there. So like a bit like Reese in the case, like generally good, but it's just maybe not somebody I think of when I think about meta. Okay, so that's for the generally meta. Okay, I think that's that. Brutus. Okay, Brutus is generally usable. Yeah. Because, okay, for Brutus' case, right, Brutus actually is a really good unit in arena in a sense. He, no matter what he does, right, he will be able to buy 5 seconds for the team. He will be able to stand on the front line and soak up some damage. But the issue with Brutus is that this unit is, I'll say, countered by the insta-kill mechanic a lot, and like he's not exactly the tankiest tank, and like you have better options up there, right? So a combination of all these reasons sort of lower his value, but in situations where you can abuse his inbound, in situations where you need a little bit of taunt, you need a little bit of damage, as well as you need a Mauler faction filling up, Brutus is actually quite useful. I use him from time to time, but not all the time, right? So yeah, it's really situation dependent, but he's usable. Like if there's not a lot of insta kill and you can do stuff to fulfill his what his kit wants to do, right? You give him a little bit of lifesteal, give him a little bit of damage reduction from Coco. He is definitely a unit that shouldn't be belittled. Okay, he's not niche, okay, but he is just not that good, so I put him in the generally usable side. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so that's for the generally usable side. So next, let's talk about the offense meta. So I'll talk about Shakir, I'll talk about Seth, I'll talk about Odie. Actually, no, Shakir is pretty meta. Yeah, Shakir is not just offense meta. I'll put all the units in offense meta first, so you guys can see it for yourself. Okay, Niru as well. Florbell, I'll say it's more offense by nature. Okay, I'll explain Florbell's case. Yeah, I'll explain Florbell's case. So I think, yeah, Vala is definitely offense meta. Okay, so I'll talk about the assassins first. So Vala, Sylvina as well as Seth, they are insanely powerful assassin units. They are good at sniping off key targets, and in different situations they excel really well. But in most of the situations where they excel at, they are more on the offensive side of things, because number one, these units, for example, like Sylvina and Vala's case, they have some sort of targeting mechanic, which if you use them on a defense, for example, your enemy can counter them a lot. So for example, for Vala's case, I think you guys should know by now, you use an Igor and put it on Vala's mark, right? The Igor's gonna draw the Vala's attention and make her just run around the whole battle. So that's one way you can counter her. Same thing for Sylvina. Sylvina goes after the last unit, so you just put a tank or a taunter at the back line and you will draw attention away from the rest of your team, and then you prevent Sylvina from doing anything. So similar for Seth, although Seth is slightly better on the defense because this unit's targeting mechanic is the weakest unit. So I think you can run Seth for defense as well, but generally not the best, because I think this sort of assassins, their role is to pounce in, right, bring down certain targets, and that's like a very offensive thing to do. So generally not the best for the defensive side of things. And for Odie's case, okay, Odie, right, this unit used to be stronger. Like used to be, I use the word used to be because this unit you see him ran both offensively and defensively, but right now I think he's a little bit too slow and he's way too frail, so he dies quite easily to a lot of existing metas, so you don't actually feel him a lot for the defensive side of things, because yeah, he doesn't survive very well and you need a lot of protection for him. So the best way to use Odie is to use him offensively to snipe down the wilders, right, to snipe out targets that cannot revive themselves, or snipe down targets like Brutus if you see people using him, or snipe down targets like Igor if you see people using him, right? So that's the role of Odie. Not the best defensive unit for sure. Then for Nero's case, I'll say Nero is a unit which I don't see a lot on defense. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, because there's a lot of good healers out there. But the few moments where I see Nero, it's people using this unit on the offense, because he does have a really powerful Supreme Plus skill, which turns your unit, which allows him to cast the ultimate immediately and then turn your ally into spirit form if they do take too much damage and die, right? So that is a very niche skill in a sense. Like, it's a good skill to use, but the situation where you I'll say like use on the defense is, I'll say, far and between. Like I just don't see Nero a lot on the defense in the first place. So there's a few comms that are currently running Nero, but I do see him being a easily countered unit in the first place. So like he's probably not a unit which I'll think of in terms of the defensive meta side of things. So that's for Nero's case. Then for Florbell's case, right, why I put Florbell on the offense meta, I think this unit is good if she can do what she wants to do, right? But if you put her on the defensive side of things, I think this unit gets countered quite easily. Just use AoE against her, right? So either use Maulers, or you use AoE against her. So I think like defensively, Florbell, you know, might see some use in the Flora Zoo com, but then again, like, that com is quite easy to counter, at least based on the current meta, as well as how some of the top units work, right, which I'll talk about later. So that's why I think Florbell is not very good defensively. And another thing is, a lot of the top tier units, as you guys can see down here, right, they are AoE attackers, so they'll have one way or another to deal with Florbell, both offensively and defensively. So Florbell's case is, she's strong, she's a good unit, but I will use her in most offensive cases rather than defensive cases, because I think she's just not very good defensively due to how many good answers there are in the meta right now. So the other unit which I almost forgot, but it's amazing on offense, is Reyna. So Reyna is just not a good unit defensively, because similar to Vala, Sylvina, he has some sort of targeting mechanic which could give a buff to your team. So that's an amazing skill, with his fractional bonus making team building a lot easier. Offensively, Reyna is one of the best formation breaker out there. But defensively, same thing. If your enemy didn't put any unit in his line of skill, then you sort of lose that part of the skill, which could be, you know, disappointing, right? Because like a lot of his kit is reliant on the dynamic balance. So if your enemy don't put units in a dynamic balance range, then this unit is not as effective, so not as good defensively. So I'll say these are the units that are good on the offensive meta. Okay. Yeah, generally I'll say these units are the units that you can definitely use for attacking people, for offenses, for breaking teams, for different situations where you need like maybe like a Zookom and your enemy is doesn't have an answer for it, then you can run them. Okay, so that's for the offense meta. Okay, next we'll talk about meta first. So the meta units, I'll talk about the Maulers first. So Shakir is actually really powerful in the arena side of things, because you provided you have his EX weapon up and you get the EX weapon to at least EX 10, right? So the reason why this unit is really meta in a sense, he's both used as a damage dealer, he's both used as a counter for Iron Com, which I think I released a video earlier to talk about. You guys can visit that. So this unit is actually one of the counters to the Iron Com, because his control immune, he do decent damage, and he reduce vitality, and he has damage reduction aura, which fits into the melee rushing team very well. So a lot of teams are built around Shakir, both offensively and defensively, and people are using this unit because of the aura. The aura is a very good aura, and this unit is a very good answer to the meta, which is very control centric. So that's for Shakir's case. Obviously you need the EX weapon because you need him to be able to transform as fast as possible and last as long as possible in a wolf form. So that's the caveat for Shakir. Like if you are in a bracket when nobody builds him up, then you don't see his power. But if you are in a bracket where people have the ability to build him up, he's actually a really powerful arena character, both at Paragon tier as well as Supreme Plus tier. Because at Paragon tier he gets damage reduction, right? He has AoE damage, which means that his skill or his ability to reduce the energy is also sort of amplified because he's able to attack multiple targets. So that's why he's a pretty meta unit. Okay, good both offensively and defensively for different reasons. He can be used for carry utility. You can also use him as a frontliner to soak up some damage. So that's why Shakir is a pretty flexible unit here. Then we have Coco. So Coco's ultimate is super impactful with the EX weapon up, right? Like this unit definitely has a role in arena. Personally, some people will say that I used to group her here because I feel that she was too slow, but I think with what I see recently, I've seen people group her with Heroin, I've seen people group her with Damien, I've also seen people group her with the likes of Torrent as well. Like this unit does everything. Like if she gets her ultimate off, right, your team is not dying. Basically that's that, right? So and I don't think it's very hard to get her ultimate off. It's basically she's very similar to Heroin in a sense. Both their ultimates are so powerful that if they do get their ultimate off, right, like your opponent's not killing you. So it's like basically invulnerability, right? And another thing that Coco has going for her is that she does have a haste hero focus, which means that her ultimate is not that slow, right? Her ultimate actually goes off a little bit faster in most cases. So that's why this unit is generally good, generally useful, and generally meta when you think about team building, when you think about offense and defense. And since most people would have built her up for the PvE progression, you guys can definitely use her in arena depending on how you build up your arena teams. So that's for Coco's case. So next I'm going to talk about all the Wilders unit first. I'll save the Graveborn to the later side. So Wilder, there's a lot of good units for arena. Okay, so Arden, we have Brian. Okay, so let's talk about the trio Wilder, right? So Damien, Arden, and Iron needs no introduction. I think you guys probably seen their power by now. The three of them together is insane, and they are good at what they do individually, right? Support, AoE, control, as well as damage and frontline tank. So they are like the face of the meta for most people, right? Because they are like units which you can get from the normal banners, the units you can get from the elite banners. So they are amazingly powerful. They are one of the strongest meta cores in the game itself, right? So that's where Shakir comes in. So Shakir sort of counters the idea of control, and Coco is also a mauler. So these two units are actually decent unit against them, and at the same time these two units can be very flexible in terms of team building as well. So that's why these two are in the meta. And then for these three, right, it's just that their skill is just so bonkers for arena per se that if you're not using them, then you're losing out, right? Either you are low on resources and you can't invest in them, or you just don't like them at all. I don't see a reason why you don't want to invest in them for arena purposes. So these are the 3 units. Bryon, Danny. Okay, next one is Hillwin. I'll talk about Hillwin first. So Hillwin basically is the same thing as Coco. If Hillwin gets her ultimate off, your team is not dying, right? You cannot stop her from casting her ultimate, because if you have the EX weapon up, she's unaffected, so her ultimate will go through. And then with the damage reduction, most of the time nobody's dying from the enemy side, or even your side if you're using Hillwin offensively. So both offensively and defensively, this unit is really good. And another thing that this unit does on the defensive side of things together with Coco is that they can store the timer such that your enemy lose due to a timeout. So yeah, it's pretty insane. If Hillwin gets her ultimate off 2 or 3 times, right, yeah, you're basically losing the match from there. So that's how powerful she is, and that's how good she is, and that's why she's meta in arena. So Bryon and Danny, right? Okay, Bryon is a severely stepped upon unit, because Bryon is actually the best single target damage dealer against the Graveborn. If you guys take a look at his kit more carefully, he counters Torrent to a specific extent as well, and he goes really well with Iron Ardent, right? Because they are the mage team, so you can run a full Wilders team if you want, and they are still really good. So that's the problem. In a sense, people underrate him because I think people don't invest in Bryon because he's not a very flexible unit, but Bryon is actually a very powerful arena unit. He has stun, he has damage, he has energy down, he has AoE damage as well. He has a little bit of everything, even a little bit of self-sustain in his EX weapon, where you cannot just snipe him off immediately because he can come back to life and he can do damage after coming back to life. So this unit is very stepped upon, very powerful in the late game, and I see a lot of him in my brackets as well as my gameplays itself. So Danny's case, Danny is meta when you are building a very control-centric team, and Danny is actually really tanky. I think the reason why, number one, people don't use Granny a lot is because this unit is particularly weak to OD. So if you want to build Granny, you need a team that can bypass this OD offense, or bypass like counters to her specifically, right? So Seth, Shakir. But the thing about Granny is her ultimate is anti-melee. So even for Seth and Shakir, right, if they don't have like if they don't have any sort of control immunity, they are still gonna get stunned by her, and from there your team can just snipe off these 2 melee units. So Granny is actually really powerful in a sense. Her counters is not very good against her, maybe except for OD, right? If you can position OD from far and you find a way to let OD shoot her down, that's one way you can counter her. But for Seth and Shakir, right, they counter Granny, but at the same time, if Granny gets her ultimate off first, this unit could get sniped off first. So there's this countering and being countered mechanic involved, but in general, Granny is one of the most meta unit in the game, in a sense, in arena specifically, because her kit is self-heal, taunt, defense up, and also a very powerful AoE control skill. So very good there. And in general, Wilders is just a really good class in arena. So if you do want to field a full Wilders team, then Granny is your best bet for the tank. And comparing to Torrent, Torrent is a more premium unit where you can't get from the arena store. So if your Torrent luck is bad, you're not getting the best tank in the game, then Granny is actually the next best option you can get, as I mentioned multiple times. So that's for the Wilder side. I think I covered everything. So for the Graveborn side, I'm going to put this 4 unit. So Carolina is part of the Iron trio. So you guys probably seen people talk about them, and you guys probably seen some of the battles with them in your bracket if you have people that are able to build them up. So I'm not going to speak too much. Then Torrent best tank, enough said, like 3 lives, right? Counter damage, anti-melee. very powerful arena unit. So Viperion, I released a video yesterday. This unit gets better with Paragon tier. In a sense, AoE units are generally better with Paragon tier because whatever they do, right, there's this stat known as the energy reduction on hit, which reduces energy regen on the enemy. In a sense, you lower their energy regen if you apply damage to them, and that's where AoE damage dealers comes in handy here, because these units are units that can reduce like it can hit everyone on the map, right? Or they can hit multiple targets on the map, so they will maximize this line of stats. And for Viperion's case, this unit is actually really powerful in the arena. In most cases, people use Carolina with Arden, but you can obviously use Viperia with Arden as well. And in certain situations, I think Viperia is even better than Carolina because this unit's damage output is actually really big. And his role, right, in this game is very arena-centric. Like, for units which don't actually see a lot of use in other game modes, they're actually very arena-centric, especially in the late game. So Viperia is basically the unit for that, right? He is a very powerful late game arena unit. I think before his EX weapon, he's not as scary, but after you get the EX weapon up, that massive burst of damage from the EX weapon is simply insane. So that's why he's in the meta tier. So Igor, I don't think I need too much explanation. This unit is one of the most annoying unit in the game if he has stats, and even in especially in arena, like if you're not countering him with insta kills, right, this unit is gonna survive for very long, and then he's gonna be a nuisance in the battlefield. so yeah, like Igor's a nuisance in PvE, right? He's also a nuisance in arena. Very powerful unit. Okay, so the next one, the only light barrel unit I'll put in the meta tier is Rowan. So the reason why I'll say Rowan is a good unit both offensively and defensively is that on the offense, right, you can keep him safe. You can protect this unit and allow him to do what he wants, which is to heal your team up, as well as cycle through their skills faster with his ultimate. And on the defensive side of things, right, you can run Rowan in specific team comps that can excel his ability. They can protect him. So the Z Store team, which I talk about, it is an iteration of the Store team on the Print Wins side of things, but he is actually a really powerful arena unit. And in most cases, right, if you're planning to use him on the offense or defense, chances are you will find a way to protect him. So his biggest issue is being really weak to the Graveborns, obviously. But at the same time, if you're planning to use him both offensively and defensively, then you probably have a way to protect him or keep him alive for him to do whatever he wants. So if you're able to do whatever he wants, he's extremely powerful, right? The more ultimates you use, the higher chance you're gonna win arena. Simple as that, right? So Rowan allows that. So if you're able to protect him, if you're able to fit him into the team, you can definitely use him for your arena runs itself. So that's for the common units. The last 3 units, right, let's just put them up into the meta tier list. So Barrow, Dwonel, as well as Skalita. They are the most expensive group of units, right? They are the most premium group of units, and all 3 of them are insanely powerful in the arena in the late game. So they are probably the late game metas where either you see some people running like the Wildest comp with Skalita in them, right? Then you see some Assassin comp with Barrow in them, or you have a hyper carry Dwonel comp, or you run the 3 of them all together, right? So these are the different teams that they are available in, and these 3 units, they are meant for arena. They are built for arena. Skalita, more specifically, is just so omnipotent. Like, he does a little bit of everything, right? Supporting, right? Control with the stuns, the ability to insta-kill, as well as the ability to do like massive AoE damage. Just a little bit of everything. Then for Barrow's case, this unit is super annoying. Like, if you're faced against him, it's like, wow, he keeps on coming back, you know, like, it's crazy. And the thing is, like, his silhouette is so annoying in disrupting your team that it's a unit that I think people don't invest in because he's very niche for arena, but for what he does, he's super duper good at it. So that's for Barrow's case. Then for Dwonel's case, very similar to Barrow. Like, Dwonel's meant to be an arena unit in a sense because you need very specific team builds as well as team buffs to make him work. But from the different people that have made him work, I can say that it's quite worth the effort if you have the resources for him, because he's, I'll say right now, one of, if not the strongest late game carry in the arena game mode at the Paragon tier because of the points which I mentioned earlier. So AoE attackers in general, they are really good with Paragon buffs because the damage boost is boosted across the board, right? Like, if you hit 5 enemies, all your 5 hits get boosted damage, and there's also this energy regen reduction on hit. So yeah, that's why Dwonel is quite bonkers in a late game for arena per se. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this tier list, right? So I'll include the final version on screen for you guys. So yeah, this is the tier list, the end game arena tier list pre-Song of Strife, right? Hopefully this tier list is helpful as usual. Do let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think of the tier list, as well as whether or not you guys disagree with it, whether or not you guys agree with it, or you guys have your own opinions on the different units on this tier list. I'd like to hear more from you guys, and let me know down in the comment section below what you guys want to see for the next tier list or the next guide on the channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. Do remember to like and subscribe to see more. I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.